take all your comments on board, and I'm going to ask Brian Salinger to report for us. And the committee is to consider the findings and recommendations of your choice Barnet cast and finish group as set out in the report attached as Appendix 1.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I start, as I'm sure that Councillor Braun would have done if she was here, by thanking the members who sat on the task and finish group for the time and the effort that they put into it. And also to thank and put on record our thanks to the officers of both Your Choice Barnet, Barnet Homes and Council officers, and in particular to Ash Tadrishi here, who was responsible for coordinating and drafting the report on our behalf. It was a short, focused piece of task and finish work. And I said that earlier, and it was a unanimous report. Councillor Mittra did make one or two small comments on the draft report, but nothing that would have detracted from any of the recommendations in the report. And Councillor Barry Rawlings, who is the deputy leader, I think, of the Labour group, was in complete support of the report that we had in front of us. And as far as the reports from UNISON and Council are concerned, those were read and considered by the members. And dealing with Councillor Mitra's other points, he highlighted on the £1 million loan, which Tracy Lees might want to say a few words about when I finish, but it's largely about cash flow, and members of the Task and Finish group were happy with the explanation that we were given to for the way in which that money had been raised would be used and would be repaid. Board membership and the involvement of parents or carers is always a difficult one, and you've heard the explanations here tonight in answer to some of the questions about the problems of recruiting service users and parents to it. One of the reasons behind wanting greater council member involvement, which is one of the recommendations, I think the fourth recommendation, is that there is no councillor representative on the board of Your Choice Barnet. And we as councillors are elected to represent all of the residents of the wards that we represent, and indeed ipso facto to represent all of the residents of the borough. I'm not going to go through the report in any detail. I just trust that members of this committee at least have read the report and hopefully understood it. But I wanted just to take a few moments to comment slightly on one or two of the other presentations that we heard from the speakers. UNISON and indeed Janet Leifer talked about benchmarking and the problems of benchmarking. All I would say to that is my belief that benchmarking is a fact of life, and that the service will be benchmarked whether it was in-house or outsourced through Your Choice Barnet. And that is something that we as councillors ought to welcome, that level of scrutiny and comparison with other services is there. As far as the engagement with carers is concerned, I'm quite happy the reassurance that I've been given and have heard, and we heard it again tonight from Your Choice Barnet, the commitment to engaging with carers and the commitment to continuing to consult. And at one point it was put to us that in fact that there was consultation fatigue with this particular fairly small group of residents, and that was one of the reasons why we decided not to pursue an avenue of greater consultation purely for our own benefit, rather than using the results of consultation carried out by others. The question of morale of staff was raised, and Councillor Mittra answered this as well when he addressed us here. when he said that I would echo it, the staff that we met, I didn't feel had any particular issues of low morale, and indeed we were, and I think I said it earlier, thoroughly impressed with the work and the commitment of those staff to the class that they were working with. Janet Leifer talked about visiting together. Yes, we did carry out the visits on Monday, that's clear in the report. But some of us do actually know these facilities. Some of us have actually been to them before and know the services that are provided there. So it wasn't the first time, certainly for me, and certainly not for Councillor Braun, and I think probably for most of the members, it wasn't the first time that any of us had been to those facilities. Had we been concerned about the quality of service that we saw, then we would have investigated it further. But we weren't. We were impressed with the service that we saw. John O'Sullivan, in the statement read on his behalf, talked about the level of services. Can I just quote one line from the CADS report dated September 13? So far, we have seen no evident impact since your Choice Barnet took over the running of the centre, and it remains an excellent model of how such a facility should operate. That was from the CADS report. There were others who want to go backwards. No change is never an option in this day and age. We live in a world where services can and do change. We cannot continue indefinitely to sway everything in aspect. We have to live within our means, and that is just frankly a fact of life. And can I say thank you as well to Philip, who I've met before and heard his story before, and as the chairman said, congratulate him on coming here and telling us his story. I have a great deal of sympathy for him, and I understand the problems. I've spoken in the past, and to some extent I understand John Sullivan's point of view. It's an ongoing problem that is growing and will one day explode.
Yeah.
There was just hear me out. There was a sea change in the way in which people with severe disabilities were living some 50, 60 years ago. At that time, people born with severe disabilities were institutionalised soon after birth. About 50, 60 years ago, that changed and parents started looking after those children. Those parents are now getting old, and many of them are struggling to look after young people, well, their children, who have outlived their life expectancy from the time they were born. We as a council will have enormous responsibilities thrust on us. I think over the next 10 or so years, it might be slightly longer, it might even be less. That is something that we have to address. But it wasn't part of what the Task and Finish group was looking at. And in fact, of all the questions that have been asked this evening, the one that caught my eye more than any other, and I throw this to my colleagues to be particularly aware of, is actually question 17, which came from Janet Lee, which said, how will the Safeguarding Overview and Scrutiny Committee or its successor committee regularly monitor progress made by your Choice Barnet in implementing the recommendations? When we move to a committee system, or should I say move back to a committee system, we are going to have to look very carefully about how those responsibilities are split between committees, and the way in which those committees are able and empowered to carry out the sort of investigations, the sort of task and finish work, group work that we've done on a number of subjects over the years that we've had task and finish groups. And it will be an important thing for members to monitor as we move towards that committee system. And lastly, I just want to stress again that the report that you have in front of you had the unanimous support of all members of the committee. Barbara Jacobson said we didn't answer the questions. Clearly, we didn't answer all the questions because it was limited in the scope that we were looking at. I think that we have dealt with the limited aspects that we looked at. I'm not saying that there aren't more that can be looked at. I'm not sure that in fact, I'm not going to support asking the Task and Finish group to go back and do more work on this subject, partly because to do so would mean resources, frankly, being taken away from other Task and Finish groups that have just started work. And by the time those resources are available again, we will have changed that committee system, and someone else in some other way after May next year and after the next round of elections will take on that responsibility for how we look at further issues to deal with the care of this particular group of exceedingly vulnerable people.
Thank you, Councillor Salinger.
Can I move that we approve this report and pass it on to Cabinet, who I understand will receive it in February. Thank you. When no doubt there will be further public discussion in Cabinet.
We're not going to have any more questions on this. We're going to move on to the next item.
There should be some discussion.
There should be some discussion. There's questions to officers and some of the things that came out.
Well, we're going to, there's going to be many items on here we're going to have.
You can move, you can
We don't have to vote now, Madam Chairman, on this. We've discussed it for an hour and a half.
you were asleep for.
I'm going to take one question.
What was actually, I
wanted to ask something though.
I do agree with Councillor Salinger about Janet
Could you
Leavy's
use your
question.
microphone, please?
I do agree with Councillor Salinger about Janet Leavy's question 17. I did actually say it to Anne Hutton at the time. It was absolutely spot on. I think with the recommendations, yes, it was unanimous. The recommendations were there based on the evidence received. I know that Councillor Rawlings and Mittra did argue that the TFG, basically the group should meet over a longer period and visit all 6 services, as well as staff and other organisations and more users. And they did actually say, they stated themselves that they felt that the service they did see was actually delivered to a very, very high standard, and I think thanks has to go to the staff delivering those services. I'd like that taken back from this committee, that the staff working under all these things, the stresses and strains need to be thanked by council for delivering the service. I do think we need to keep the Task and Finish group open no matter what. Bear in mind that a lot more evidence was raised here tonight. But one thing I do, and it's really around officers, there still seems to be, coming through conversations, a default mechanism from the council, whether it's right or wrong, to go to direct payment rather than personal
I'm sorry,
budgets.
Councillor.
I just like to say, I
Who
want to
are
raise
you
this with the
asking this
officers.
question of?
Officers. As a councillor, I have every right to ask a question of an officer.
I'm sorry.
And I also said, you said in there that Flightways isn't closing. What is happening to that site, and why are users of that service under the indication that it is closing in 2014?
Madam Chair, is this correct? There's a very committee and there's an open up discussion all over again. We've heard a very expansive report from it.
Let me ask questions of the
Now
public,
I'm
not officers.
asking you to approve it and vote on it and move on, Madam Chair.
Let's hear the answer to the
I
question.
think we can just ask, we can just get Councillor McGurk's question answered. And then we stop there.